As a follow-up to my podcast last week on the fall of Assad's regime, I happened to go to the library again and I picked up yet another book. It's called Evil Dictators, The Lives and Times of History's Worst Tyrants, and it's by Diane Law. What can I say about it? A dictator. Dictator is a term that was first used way back in the Greek and the Roman empires. A dictator is defined as a leader who, in times of an emergency, for example, if there was an invasion, the Senate would suspend their powers, and they would confer all their emergency powers to that one person. And the theory was that basically that person would then deal with the crisis. That person would have been a military general who would sort out the crisis for them. And then once the crisis was over, he would then pass his power back to the Senate. The reality, though, is what you find is, firstly, if there was no democracy in the first place, who's he going to hand the power back to? Secondly, if he does a good job, the people, that particular crisis would just roll on for year after year after year, and the people would just come up with the idea that, sure, he's doing a great job, we'll leave him to it. Or if the situation if that was the case, what would happen was a switch would flip in his mind, and he'd suddenly say to himself, I'm better than the rest of you, I'm in charge from now on, from the rest of my life. Or alternatively, he'd get paranoid and he'd start killing off the opposition to make sure that he was the cornerstone in that power structure. Of course, if things went wrong, he would go paranoid, and he would then go about killing and murdering and using the best of his abilities to make life bad for everybody. So, who were all the different dictators that we covered? The first one was Caligula. He was Roman emperor. Through happenstance, he was born into royalty, and he had a precarious childhood. He learned Machiavellian kind of ways of staying out of trouble, and he basically found himself emperor. A switch was flipped in his mind, and he literally went insane, and he purged and murdered an awful lot of people, and he got to a point where nobody could say no to him, and he was demanding outrageous sort of things off his people, like trying to make his horse a senator, for example. The next one was Genghis Khan, Mongolian. He had a precarious upbringing also. He was intelligent, though, and what he did was he was able to bring all the other Mongolian tribes together, and they decided to pillage westward. And what they would do was they would sack one city. They'd take all the males out of it and use them as cannon fodder for the next city over. And on top of that, they'd kill anybody that they didn't need, and anybody that they wanted, they'd keep them as slaves. They'd send them back to Mongolia along with anything that they plundered from that particular city. The thing about Genghis Khan and the pillaging that went on was the fact that he was very, very good at doing it. He got as far as the east of Poland in Europe, and he caused an awful lot of slaughter throughout the Eurasian continent. And what we get from him was that he was intelligent enough to organize something like this. But in the end, there was no good from it. Ivan the Terrible, he was an emperor of Russia. Again, through happenstance, he found himself, he became emperor through birthright, and basically he went insane as well, and he basically started executing anybody who contradicted him, causing mass murder, and he even killed his own son, and he died himself of syphilis or possibly mercury poisoning. Stalin, he was one of the first leaders of communism. It wasn't his idea, communism. It was Marxist, and he just happened to be the strong guy who enforced the communist ideology in Russia, and he came into prominence in that when Leon Trotsky and Lenin were murdered, he became the leader, and he through the crisis of the Second World War, he solidified his power, and afterwards he caused so many purges and executions. He killed so many of his rivals that everybody was so fearful from him that even the time when he died, it took nearly 24 hours before anybody had the bravery, the courage to actually go into his bedroom to realize that he was dead. Adolf Hitler, again, there was nothing, he wasn't particularly talented in anything except for the fact that he was good at, he was very charismatic on the stage, and he was very good at enforcing his ideology on a lot of people and influencing the German people to follow him and his ideology of National Socialism, extremist views, and as a result, the German people were led way the wrong path, and as a result of it, they suffer from that from even today. Mao Zedong as well, Chinese, he brought the communism to China, but he did it through eliminating his opponents, the Kuomintang, who eventually went on to go to Taiwan and set up an independent Taiwan from China. Mao Zedong was then, he utilized a lot of the methods that Stalin had used, including purges, cultural revolutions, and causing his policies caused the deaths and starvation of millions, untold millions. Emperor Bokassa I, he was he found himself, he was firstly, Central African Republic was a colony of the French, and Bokassa himself, he was a member of the French army. He rose to, I think it was a colonel. But anyways, after the Second World War, France ceded the colony, basically made it independent, and he became the top guy. Switch was flipped in his mind basically, and he became so vain. He tried to. He ended up. He was infatuated with everything French, and even on his coronation, had to be right down to the same details as the coronation of Napoleon, and he spent incredible amounts of the people's money, and he was extremely corrupt, and the people that were around him were corrupt on account of it. Idi Amin, on the other hand, he was Zimbabwe, I think, no, Uganda. Idi Amin, Uganda was, after the Second World War, the British were releasing that as a colony, and it basically came to Idi Amin eventually came into power after the English tried to formally make it an independent state. But Idi Amin, he tried to go the communist way. He also tried to extort money from Gaddafi in Libya as well. He was also responsible for when the PLO hijacked Israeli airlines. They landed in Uganda, and Idi Amin allowed all that. But yeah, he was an extremist dictator, and he was very harsh on his people, causing a lot of exterminations and killing a lot of his rivals as well. He was insane also. Nicolae Ceausescu from Romania, he found himself in the situation where he was in charge of the Romanian people and the Romanian country, and he a switch flipped in his brain. Basically, he became super vain, so far as he believed that the Romanian people loved him. The people around Nicolae Ceausescu enforced that upon him, made him feel that he was in fact the most important person in the Romanian world, and as a consequence of that, like things like the newspaper had to mention his name at least 50 times in every single edition of the papers. So naturally enough, there was a revolt in there, and he ended up being killed. Francois Papadoc Duvalier from Haiti. Haiti has always been a disheveled kind of state. It belonged to the French at one time, it belonged to the British, and it was always impoverished. And basically, in the 60s, Papadoc, he spoke up for the peasant, and he basically wangled his way into the top spot in that country, and he tried to extort money from America in the form of, he was always trying to say that Haiti was going to turn communist if the Americans didn't invest in them. But of course, whatever money that came into Haiti ended up in his hands or in the hands of his cronies as well. And a lot of money was lost in the time when he was in charge. General Augusto José Ramón Pinochet Ugarte, he's from Chile. Back before the Second World War, Chile was a democracy. It was a thriving democracy. However, on account of the Second World War, there was a downturn, an economic downturn globally. However, the people in Chile decided maybe it was a good time to switch to communism. They tried it for a few years, but it wasn't working out. And as a result of that, on the auspices of the US President Nixon and the CIA, they financed and they encouraged the military to actually take control of the country. And the person they put in charge was Augusto Pinochet. And as a result of the coup, a lot of people disappeared, a lot of people were executed, a lot of people were lost in the sea. And as a result, after many years of Pinochet's rule, he did in fact step down, and he did hand back power back to the people, as it should have been. However, as honourable as it was for him to do so, it wasn't honourable enough, in that under his watch there was a lot of people disappeared and executed on his watch. Pol Pot as well, he was Cambodia. He was communist. He had a disdain for people who lived in the cities, particularly Phnom Penh and all the cities around there. His modus operandi was to actually empty out the cities and put them out in the rural countryside, where they either starved or they served the peasants and the people that supported Pol Pot in the first place. As a result, many millions, untold millions, disappeared in those forests, rainforests. Saddam Hussein, he started off, he had a precarious childhood as well. He found himself as leader of the Ba'athist Party, the majority party in Iraq. And when the times were good, he actually found himself as their sole leader. And when the oil prices were high, he actually did very well for the country. He was backed by the US government. He was doing incredible things for the Iraqi people at the time. However, the Iran-Iraq war must have caused him to flip a switch in his mind, because suddenly he started causing genocide to the Kurdish people. He was hard on Shia Muslims as well. Like, he seemed to be paranoid about a lot of the different religious and sectarian groups. Eventually he ended up invading Kuwait on the grounds that, firstly, he believed that Kuwait belonged to Iraq in the first place, and that it was really a line drawn in the desert by the West. But as a result, like, the international community wouldn't stand by and allow a country like Kuwait to be invaded. Not only were they the fact that they were a significant contributor of oil and gas to the rest of the world, but internationally it didn't look good for Saddam to invade Kuwait. So as a result of that, two Gulf Wars and a regime change, and he was finally caught and executed. Robert Mugabe, he's from Zimbabwe. Again, he was a promising leader at the beginning. He was benevolent, he did the right stuff, and then he just switched, flip of the switch, and he made himself president for life. And as a result, he murdered all his oppositions, and basically, if there was a problem, he'd have them eliminated. So what do I get from going through all those various dictators? Firstly, I find that they are all ordinary people. That it was through sheer happenstance that they found themselves in these particular situations where they created and they formed unilateral ideas. The likes of Genghis Khan, and like that was tribal. He was physically, he was a strong leader. Same as Stalin. Physically, they had the physique of a leader. Like, they were big and strong and powerful looking people. So a lot of people would have looked up to that. Today, now, they, like, people with the right physical characteristics, it's not enough. They have to be able to come across better ideologically. Secondly, the likes of Adolf Hitler and Stalin, maybe, they were all very good at mentally challenging other people, confronting other people, and pushing their ideologies onto other people. That doesn't work out these days anymore, on account of the fact that it might work on a regional level or a local level, but when it comes to a national level or even an international level, it just doesn't add up. So those kind of leaders, they don't have as much influence as they had way back in their time. Also, this idea, like the communism idea, a lot of these dictators did try to use communism as their solution, their ideological solution, and it just didn't add up and it didn't work out. And it seemed to be that the only way to make it work was to exterminate an awful lot of people, a lot of opposition, which in the end doesn't work out, and it will never work out. What else do I get from it? Bashir Assad, he was more of a coward than a dictator. He found himself in the situation on account of the fact that his father was in charge of Syria for so long, and Assad, the father figure, was much stronger than Bashir Assad, who was a doctor, and as a result of that, he was a coward. He literally fled the country, leaving half his own family behind him as well. The likes of Putin as well, like, is he an evil dictator? Absolutely. And I go with the example that last year, Prigozhin was actually his head of catering at one stage, and suddenly he got promoted to leader of the Wagner mercenaries. And then when Prigozhin rebelled and brought his mercenaries, he was within 100 miles of invading Moscow when he got a call from Putin, and suddenly Prigozhin lost the will to overturn Putin. And that suggests to me that Putin has basically made himself the cornerstone in the entire political structure of Russia. Once Putin goes down, it'll be pure anarchy. So Prigozhin was willing to just he literally lost the will to take down Putin, and literally he ended up in a mysterious air incident a few weeks later. What about dictatorships in the West? Is Trump going to be an evil dictator? Not at all. He's an influential leader. Yeah, he might have rough corners. He might have issues with legal and lawsuits against him, but there's plenty of checks and balances to make sure that he doesn't flip a switch in his brain and suddenly declare himself emperor or something like that. Furthermore, in Ireland, we had the elections there a couple of weeks ago. A crime figure, a crime boss, ended up putting his name in the election ring in Dublin City Central. He fared strongly. However, I remember just seeing he came to the counting centre, and he was approached by about 50 odd journalists, and you could see it in his eyes when he walked up to these journalists. He was about to say something, and he suddenly realized this is a very, very bad idea, because there was only two questions thrown at him. Firstly, what did he stand for? He didn't have an answer for that. And the second question was what was he going to do when he goes to the special criminal court in 2 weeks' time? He had no answer for that. He literally ran out of the place. There is no place for charismatic people like him to ever find themselves in a position of leadership. Even if he was to actually get a place, like, he would have to go to the Dáil. The other TDs would tear strips off him. He wouldn't be able to get anything past them. It just simply wouldn't work out. It wouldn't add up on a national level or even an international level as well. So that's all I have to say. Have a happy Christmas, and hopefully we'll see you in the new year. Take care.